Hello everyone, Andy here from Biohazard Declassified as always. Welcome to this edition of the Biohazard Declassified podcast. I'm very excited to bring to you Resident Evil Revisited and the team behind the project. So gentlemen, please introduce yourselves. Oh. I think his mic's not coming through.
I was muted. I apologize. Hi, guys. My name is Elric, E-L-R-I-C, or Helric, depending on what site you see me at. I've been modding RE games for about a year, modding games in general for about 26 years now.
I'm Andrew, also gone by the name of Enrico Marini a long time ago. Been modding Resident Evil for God knows how long, 20 years, something like that. A very long time.
And what we'll do is we'll watch a short trailer on Resident Evil Revisited so everybody can see what we're going to be talking about today. So let's pull that up on the screen.
Must be an umbrella guest. Was it you making all that racket? There hasn't been many of you around lately.
Well, I'm afraid I won't be staying. We have a situation. I need access to the facility.
Well, if you're in such a hurry, I'd suggest you take the key behind that counter and get started.
She has a note in her hand. Today, all your dreams come true. Sorry, Dollface. Guess this wasn't for you. I understand the protocol, but this is a time-sensitive manner. Is there any scenario in which we skip the formalities and you just tell me how to power that lift?
You know just as well as any of us that this isn't how this works, Mr. Trent.
Might as well get started, I guess.
Resident Evil Revisited.
Okay, so there's a lot to unpack there. But what we'll do is we'll start by, where did the idea of Resident Evil Revisited come about?
Um, it's kind of like Aiden said with containment. It's going to sound a bit of an uninspired story, to be honest. When I first joined the community about a year ago, I've been modding other games for many, many years. Specifically, console games is a big thing for me. When I got into the scene, it wasn't exactly easy to find out how to do what. It wasn't easy to find the proper Discord to find information. And so I really started playing around with the tools. I started ripping assets from other PlayStation games because I love the fixed background style. And so I said, you know what, we can take some of these Parasite Eve 2 graphics, we can edit them a little bit, make them appear more as the Arclay Mountains. We can use this as an introduction for going back into the mansion. A big thing for me was, I love Resident Evil 1 and Resident Evil 2, but if I have to choose the RPD over the Spencer Mansion, I love the Spencer Mansion. But there's certain things in RE2 that you don't have in RE1, certain quality of life things. And I wanted to see how that would play out if I could get that into the Resident Evil 2 engine itself, and then create my story that way. And so really it started out as me learning how to do a lot of this stuff. I converted every room from the mansion by hand over to Resident Evil 2, the scripting data or the collision data, cameras, everything.
And yourself, Andrew?
Oh, I came onto the project to basically assist with the art side of things, as Elric was working hard on pretty much getting every room from Resident Evil 1, 2, and 3 into Resident Evil 2 at one point. It was a really ambitious project. Basically, he had, I think at one point you had like almost every room all running.
Yeah.
You had rooms stacked upon rooms. It was like
that we did have. I was literally stacking camera data and collision data on top of other data, and then through scripting choosing what was displayed upon entering the room to try and literally fit as much as possible into this game. And even still, it's going to be 2 parts.
So we've had modders on, Resident Evil modders on before. Obviously, we've had Aiden on. Just talk us through, and I'm going to say talk us through it briefly, but as best as you can in as small time as you can. Just talk us through what is involved with effectively reverse engineering a 22-year-old game. Or sorry, 24-year-old game.
As Aiden said, it is pretty insane work. The hardest part was really figuring out how the structures worked. And, I really can't thank Megan Grass, PM Data, enough for all the information and documentation that they left on these things. But there was no real clear-cut way to take something like a Resident Evil 1 room or a room from Resident Evil 1.5, or especially Resident Evil 3, where there's a lot more camera usage, and convert it over to Resident Evil 2. So my process initially was making converters. And so I made converters to convert first the collision data, which is where you can and can't run, as well as the cameras, which is obviously, what we see, the angle we see it from, where we see the character, and then the zones where the cameras switch. Because I feel like those 3 things are the main basis for any room. If you have that, then you can start adding items, you can start adding enemies, you can start adding scripting, lighting, etc. But reversing all of that is probably why I know as much as I do now, because now there are easier ways to do some of the things that I've done because we have more tools. I've made some, Megan's made some. But it was really a challenge getting things like 1.5, where we don't have really a whole lot of any data to work within Revisited. And we only use a finite number of rooms from that, but that's in part 2 of the mod. But really, all of this came before the mod ever really started. We didn't even have a main character back then. I mean, we were using Claire as a placeholder. So it was really reverse engineering the entire structure of the rooms from all 4 of these games to really understand how it works in order to build converters between them.
I appreciate this may be a layman's way of putting it, but if I pose this question to you, Andrew, is it easier now? I know you've been in the Resident Evil modding universe for what seems like forever. Is it easier now to modify Resident Evil 2 than it was, say, even 10 years ago?
Yes and no. Yes, there are a lot of tools now that can help streamline things, but also there's a lot of little nuances that the tools don't do. Basically, because I've been modding for so long, I used to do everything by hex editing. So I know there's a few tricks and things I can do which the tools don't account for. So yes, it is for new people to start. It's a lot easier to swap out models and get information, but at the same time, there's a few things that get overlooked at the same time. So a few of the tools haven't been updated for a while, or they're quite restrictive on what they can do.
Gotcha. And yourself, Elric?
Honestly, I haven't been around as nearly as long as Andrew has. I started on Resident Evil Revisited was my first project before Aiden invited me into Gaiden, and we can talk about that a little bit later. I've done everything I can since I came here to break down these walls. I've created from tools to convert rooms to other games, to change around, swap around how the background music works, what music or what room it plays in. I've also just made a front end to a program made by Waterfuel to add custom masks to the PS1 version, which you guys have seen in the Survivor Redux. So that has been fantastic. But my goal really is just I want to make as many tools, as many quality of life things for people to make this easier, because there's been a perception that a lot of this is a lot harder than what it is. And while, as Andrew said, some things are still quite difficult, stuff like music on PS1 is still quite difficult. There's really not that many differences between versions as people once thought. And so if we can break down those walls, we can start getting these mods out to more and more people to enjoy them to the fullest extent.
So on that note about kind of getting it out there to everyone as much as possible, you're intending, and I don't, I'm not leading the witness, feel free to interject. You're intending for this to come out on PC as well as PlayStation 1?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the ultimate goal is actually to have it be on PC, PS1, GameCube, and Dreamcast. Right now, PS1 and PC are the priorities. We know how to do everything on PS1. Sounds and music can be done. It's just very tedious and time consuming. That's something I'm working on writing a guide for, just because there's so many steps in it. But outside of that, everything else, at this point can be done without any issue within the limitations of the PlayStation's VRAM.
Yeah, I've been trying to keep restrictive with the graphics and not go too overboard. PC is a bit more lenient than the PlayStation will be. So it's a case of keeping within the poly counts, within the texture sizes, so it'll make it a lot easier to port over.
Well, just on that note then, Andrew, what are the intricacies on porting this to 4 or 5 different platforms? Just give us a little summary with regard to art.
Same format for the character models, so it's pretty much copy paste.
Oh right, okay. So actually, it's easier.
It's easier. It's just the PC can do up to, I think, 2,500 polygons per character model, whereas obviously you can't do that on the PlayStation.
Okay, so it's almost, you don't want it to. You've still got it. Even though you've got the constraints of reverse engineering a 24-year-old game,
yeah,
you've still got constraints of each platform that you have to work toward.
Yes, it sometimes is a little difficult because you want to make it look the best you can, but at the same time you've got to go, well, that won't work here if you do that. And it's like, I think you can increase the texture size as well, add on a few extra bits and pieces here, but eventually you're going to hit a point where you put it on the PlayStation and the VRAM is just going to cry. It's just going to crash.
So on the note about we've spoken a bit about kind of the background development of it. Let's start talking about the story. So we know we're picking up from Trent, who is from the S.D. Perry novels.
Yep.
Yes, exactly.
So run us through that rationale.
So originally, I was just going to use a generic scientist. I had considered John as a possible candidate, but really, I wanted to know, what happened. What did Umbrella do as soon as this first initial outbreak happened? What was their initial reaction? What was their goal? What did they try to salvage? What didn't they? Going back to the books, I used to listen to some narrations, and I've read them all many times, but while I was working third shift, I used to listen to these narrations by, I think he used to be called Zombie Duck Productions on YouTube. And They were fantastic. And listening to them again, the character Trent came up, and I said, we never, because there was never more books, we really didn't get closure to this character. We do know that when he was away at boarding school as a kid, his Umbrella killed his parents, took their research, and that's ended up evolving into part of the T virus. And I know that's changed a little bit now with the story and everything, but I really liked that story. So I said, what can we do with Trent in this manner? And so I know that a lot of people have brought up that Trent is more of a company man, or, maybe he was a little bit older, but that was never really discussed in the books. Yes, we know he's a company man, and he gives Jill and Claire information regarding the mansion or the puzzles within the police station. But where did he get that information? I know that he's an employee of White Umbrella, but having him go in to actually start collecting that data and investigating this for Umbrella, but at the same time doing what he needs to do from the inside to start his process of taking down Umbrella, it leaves a lot of room to experiment and play with for us.
So it's basically just trying to weave the two different universes into one kind of.
Exactly.
And this is what makes it. And this, we talk about During the Storm and the Resident Evil During the Storm, and it kind of depicts that initial outbreak. What were the civilians like? I think this is it's almost like you found the gap in the market that you needed that hasn't been explored, at least from a game perspective. So where do you intend? And I appreciate you don't want to spoil. You don't want to spoil everything, but where do you want? Do you want ultimately the story to go through, like the main kind of arcs, if you will?
So the story, obviously we start in the Arklay Mansion, you will, or the Arklay Mountains. Eventually you will get to the Spencer Mansion. And I don't feel like too much of this is spoiler, because all of this was discussed on the Resident Evil modification forum about a year ago. But my basic idea is, obviously there will be more to it, but for the first part of the mansion, you will be, and in some points, setting up some of the puzzles from the game. Let's say you have to find the blue gem and put it in the statue above the dining room to get a key for Trent to progress. But that's why that gem is there for Chris or Jill. So that's kind of where we're going with it. We want to keep it as lore friendly as possible. We want to say, well, you know what? This could have happened before the first game. And in that same vein, part 2 of the game takes up about 3 months later after part 1 ends, and you do this similar thing with the areas of Resident Evil 2, 1.5, and 3. And so we've actually thought about it quite a bit. Without spoiling too many story things, I can tell you one of the big things that you can expect to see in Revisited is randomization. Randomization is not native to Resident Evil 2 like it is Resident Evil 3. So we coded in our own randomization after me and Andrew went back and forth for, over a month trying to figure out the best way to do this. And I think that we've gotten a pretty solid way for it to work now. I do apologize to any speedrunners, but just because you remember the combo to a puzzle does not mean it's going to work the second time. You're going to need to go ahead and do that puzzle again.
To add on to that, it isn't a case of there's like a set number of codes that it selects from. It's randomizing every digit.
So I mean, technically, yeah, there's about 43,000 possibilities with the way we have it set up right now.
If you save and go into a room and get the digit again, it's going to be different when you reload and go into the room. So yeah, it's not going to be friendly to speedrunners.
Nope.
And what you'll see this from the trailer. What I love about when we go to the Spencer Mansion, you've almost extended. You've kept the original, but you've extended it to include some of the remake assets, which I think is absolutely brilliant. Talk us through why didn't you just choose the original Spencer Mansion? Why did you feel the need to adapt it like that?
Honestly, that was I think that was one of Andrew's very first things he did when he came and joined me. After Gaiden split up, we weren't really sure what to do, and so I asked him, "Hey, would you want to come over here and work on this with me?" And if I remember correctly, the first thing he did was we had talked about the remake backgrounds, and I said, I'd really like to eventually, totally remake, obviously remake within Resident Evil 2. And so he grabbed the backgrounds from Lisa's cabin, and whatever magic he did with that to make it look like it would work on the PS1 was fantastic. It was beautiful. And so I used those backgrounds, and over the course of about a day and a half, I actually made Lisa's cabin using Claire as my placeholder. That video is on my YouTube. It's not hidden or anything like that. And it looks so good. And so next we did the little guard shack that connects the mansion with the courtyard. And it just fits so well. And I mean, it may look a little bit out of place because it's higher definition, but not nearly as out of place as you would expect. And from there, we were like, okay, well, we have X amount of areas that were only in Remake, so we can keep what we have from the original game, add in what was in Remake, and then we also have some other newer areas that we're adding as well as the mansion.
It just comes from trying to have something new, so it's not just a complete retread of the first mansion. So you're playing it, and it's like, oh, this wasn't here before. This is interesting.
Exactly.
And again, what's kind of beautiful about this is it's not just Resident Evil 1, 2, and 3. There are other pre-rendered games with pre-rendered backgrounds, like Parasite Eve, which I've actually been playing Parasite Eve 2 for the first time on my channel a couple of weeks ago. So to see some of the locations reused, I was like, oh my God, that actually fits really, really well. So that was, whose idea was that?
That was mine initially. Okay. And so originally Biohazard Hispana, or BHE, he had edited them for us a little bit to fix some lighting issues. After I started putting out nightly builds to the team, we decided, well, some of these actually look a little bit better with their darker background. And then Andrew redid most of them. He added trees to the areas, made it look more mountainous. But I love Parasite Eve. Parasite Eve is one of my favorite PS1 games. Both the first two games. We won't talk about third birthday, but
no third birthday.
It is what it is. But I wanted to see. We hear about the Arclay Mountains in the beginning of the first game. We hear about them throughout notes throughout the games, but we've never gotten to really go there. It's like, what would that look like? And what can I feasibly do with the skills I had at the time, which was before anybody else joined the project? I said, well, I can start building some of these rooms. I have, for most rooms, an overhead view. I have a basic idea of what the collision looks like. And it was the best practice I could have had for learning how to do things within Resident Evil 2.
Some people just don't realize how long it takes to put all of that in. It's not just a case of
and that's something that's come up on YouTube a lot, where people are like, oh, well, they're just copy pasting scenarios from Parasite Eve 2, or they're just guys. It's literally only the backgrounds came from Parasite Eve 2. Everything else is custom built.
All the collision, all the lighting, all the interactions, all the doors.
Yep, everything.
Well, this is what I love about Aiden, and I love about what you guys are putting together, is that we've all played them. We've all played the Key 2 mods, and I'm not ripping on Key 2 mods. Please don't assume that I'm doing that, but we've played super hard. Yeah, let's just throw 10 Mr. X's at you. That, to me, that's not a true definition of what a Resident Evil mod means to me. To make something that's kind of canonically compatible with the original series, I mean, that will hold its weight so much more, and actually probably be more fun to work on for you guys.
One thing with those kind of mods is I'm surprised no one's tried pairing enemies together. They probably have, but I haven't seen them. But instead of just having like 10 Mr. X's, why not have a Mr. X and a dog? So the dog is fast, catches you, so that Mr. X has a chance to catch up to you, and sort of pair the difficulty that way.
Well, we did actually see that in a game. From my memory, we only really started seeing a mixture between multiple enemies in RE3, when the Nemesis would follow you around and it wouldn't necessarily change. Because I think in RE2, and I don't know whether that's the limitations of the engine, because when I was playing the Overhaul mods, Origin of Species, I noticed that Mr. X follows you, but if you go into a room that previously had enemies in it, it will be clear. So is that the limitations of the engine?
A little. Resident Evil 2 can handle 2 unique enemies at a time. So, but the problem mainly comes down to sounds. Each room has a sound bank, and if you put an enemy in that isn't supposed to be there, you'll get like a zombie sounds on Mr. X or something really weird.
Right.
That's where I come in.
Oh, okay. So then
you will see that.
Okay. So is that something we're going to see in Revisited?
Yeah, because so when Capcom's building something with a source, they already have in mind what they want to do. They know, okay, we're going to have this many people, we're going to have this many enemies in a room based on our VRAM limitations, and so we're going to create our sound banks for this, and this. Whereas, sometimes in Resident Evil 2, you can have like Ada's sound plus a zombie sound in one room. So they have 99 different sound banks in the game, roughly. And most of them are exactly the same. Some of them contain sounds from other things, but one could feasibly create a sound bank that has like Mr. X and a zombie or Mr. X and a dog in the same room. I just don't think it's something that they ever had planned to do initially. And so it's not something that any modders so far would have really experimented with too much. I think just because it wasn't something that was initially built within the game. It's something that we're going to have to change up a little bit to make work.
Yeah, Elric's been looking into that because we're going to have unique zombie sounds. Trying to have a
Yeah.
whole load.
Andrew's actually recorded a bunch of zombie sounds for us to use, so that's going to be awesome.
Oh, brilliant! Oh, so effectively, you could be in a position where you have individual zombies with like they all have their own set of sound effects and.
Essentially, yeah. It's really gonna depend, what the room contains. How many different zombies do we have? There's one specific zombie at the beginning of Resident Evil 2 that while you're climbing over the dumpster to try and go through the gate, there's a female zombie and two different male zombies in that room. But that zombie uses a special slot within the game that can actually have several different textures within the same zombie. So there's a lot of little tricks like that we can utilize to make it look like you're seeing something that you're even not some of the time.
Understood. No, and again, like I think Aidan brings up a good point in the chat. People don't appreciate that it's not like you're working with, for example, and I don't want to oversimplify this. You're not working with Unity or you're not working with Unreal Engine 4, where you've got tools at your disposal. You're reverse engineering a game to make it work and play like a game that you want it to play like. And there are boundaries and there are constraints to doing that. So it's incredible that we're even at a point. I remember 10 years ago, like looking at how difficult it was to play, for example, Mortal Night, and how easy it is to launch a mod. Like let's bring Aidan in, for example. Like he did Marvin's mod, and it's literally just a double click on an executable, and we're there. It's actually unbelievable.
That's thanks to Gemini and the classic Rebirth. He's made the Source Next versions mod friendly, so you're not having to overwrite files and try and force things to work.
Definitely.
It also makes
it's kind of a modder's dream, to be honest, because we don't have to, exactly like Andrew said, we don't have to overwrite assets while we're in development mode. We can have our own folder. We can have all of our files, and if we have a file with the same name as vanilla, our file is going to overwrite it. Otherwise, it's going to play the vanilla file, and it makes testing so much easier. So
we can just make another folder and make another instance and test something there without having to affect the first mod folder, and then you're not losing files as you're overwriting them.
Yeah, no, it's fantastic.
Who's doing or how does because I see a couple of CG kind of cutscenes in a way. Who was responsible with that? Do you want to talk us through that, Andrew?
Basically, it's just a simple scene. I mean, any free 3D assets I have been using, I've been making a note of the creators so we can credit them when the project completes. But it's basically just very simple animations in a few tools just to get the effect. Yeah,
because you've got the kind of the car scene. Which crashes, and then you've got the kind of Parasite Eve setup, and we'll try and not use the term Parasite Eve setup, but where the car crashes and Trent is now what is that area going to be called? Just remind us.
Those are the Arklay Mountains.
They are the Arklay Mountains. Okay.
And it's going to be a day in Raccoon Motel.
A day in Raccoon Motel. It just works. It really just works, doesn't it?
does. It really does. I mean, especially when Andrew, because in the initial build, we didn't even have the motel. It was literally just that opening area, the gas station, and then the underground area to get into the mansion. El Rincon del Lobenzo, one of the graphic modelers and other modders within our community, due to a mistranslation, he thought we were going to be using the motel areas. So him and Biohazard Hispana started doing some edits to them. And I had never had any intention to build them. But then Andrew brought up the cut scenario from Outbreak and the A Day in Raccoon Motel. And so that's really how that all evolved. The area went from being 6 or 7 rooms up to about 24 rooms, which is larger than the courtyard and guardhouse within the first Resident Evil game combined.
Just talk us through that cut campaign in Outbreak for context.
Oh, I don't think there's too much known. You basically arrive at a motel, and Mickey, the owner, wants you to go around and find some videotapes for him before the game progresses. And unfortunately, that's pretty much what everyone knows about it.
But again, it's using, on top of using your unbelievable modding skills, it's making it canonically compatible with Resident Evil, and I think that's so important, and which is why I think, just like During the Storm and just like some of the projects that Aiden's putting together, it's why you're getting so much interest. It's why this absolutely. I remember seeing the trailer and it just spreading like wildfire on Twitter.
That definitely caught me off guard. Me and Andrew had been talking about making a trailer for a while. We wanted something to show everybody, but I'm a coder. I'm not one to really do things like that and really be totally out. And so I said, we don't really have anybody to make a trailer. I have all this footage that we've recorded over all this time during testing. I could probably put together some sort of trailer. And so I took one of Andrew's tracks, which was a remix from Clock Tower, which is what you hear in the trailer. And I really let that track guide the entire creation of the trailer itself, because it fits so well in my opinion.
It fits really good.
It just, everything, when it came together, I was so happy with it. And I posted it, but then Aiden shared it and it blew up. It absolutely exploded, and I couldn't be more happy with that. It was a little overwhelming for a minute there, but I will definitely say that I've been modding for a long time, but it's mostly smaller communities, older games. My thing, who plays older games? Not that many people play them, but the fact that this many people can appreciate it and still can appreciate this perspective and this fixed camera angle perspective is just that it's astounding to me, and I love the reception we've gotten.
It's trying to be a love letter to the old games, not just Resident Evil, but just generally a bit of like the PlayStation 1 era.
Yeah. Well, as you can see from our Final Fantasy VIII references that Andrew slipped in there, that had me dying.
I've slipped a few more in as well.
That's brilliant, and that's what's key. And I think the key to, and I'm not the ultimate success guide or anything, but I think people have an appreciation for the old Resident Evil games, but not even that. Parasite Eve, the Final Fantasy games, which typically use that style of pre-rendered backgrounds, they're a product of their time, and people are interested in it. And if you can get it to them in a format which is easy to just launch, I think that's the key thing. Like, you got a lot of these really cool mods, but they struggle to get into people's hands because you've got to overwrite files, or you've got to use until the Source Next version really started to kind of get out there, and we just had Resident Evil 2 Platinum. It was kind of hard to enjoy these mods because you'll get a crash or X, Y, Z. So I think what you got, you're not even just releasing it on PC, just for the fact you're taking that extra step, and it might take time, but it will pay off in the long run. I mean, I suppose your ultimate goal in a way is get this on a PS1, get this on a CRT, and it'll be like a brand new game.
I make PS1 mod chips, and I have for years, and I sell them. I literally have a PS1 that's connected to a CRT that I test this mod on, and it's the best thing ever for me to be able to see it like that.
I wish I had the space for a CRT, because I'd love to go back and play Gun Survivor with the light gun. The same with
well, you guys in Europe actually got light gun support for that. We didn't.
I went back in like 2006, 2007, played Survivor with the light gun, and I was like, this is a lot better than playing it with the controller.
Yeah, and you know, a horrible plug here because I know this episode's about you, but I recently actually did manage to get the Wii Zapper working on Duck Station, so we can now play. And it's I'll launch I'll put a tutorial. Actually, I did put up a tutorial for Survivor. It's on our page, so you can play Resident Evil Survivor as it was initially intended.
It gets a lot of
I'm
flack.
gonna have to check that out.
It's not a bad game. It's just not a classic Resident Evil, and without the gun support, it was just terrible.
It wasn't a classic Resident Evil.
Yeah.
Well, but this is what I mean. You're almost it's unfair. It's the same as Dead Aim. It's the same as Code Veronica 2. It's unfair to review it. It's like playing It's like playing a racing game without a steering wheel, and then going, "Oh, this game's terrible." Well, you're not playing it how you was meant to play it.
I will say this for Dead Aim: if you get the, I think it's the Mad Catz GunCon 2 controller, it has the analog stick on it, and I think that game is fantastic, especially if you're using that controller. Oh, it's amazing. But you need a CRT.
A very, very cheap plug. But I did get Gun Survivor, Resident Evil Dead Aim, working with a Wii Zapper.
That's perfect.
I did it last week.
That is perfect. That is beautiful.
Yeah, it's got the stick on the back, so it's.
But that right there, just I mean, the amount that says for how much people appreciate and love these old games is just that's why I'm doing this, and it's fantastic.
Yeah, no, we're the same, you know. Back, you know, I was born sort of late mid '90s, so you know when I was growing up playing Resident Evil. Well, when I was growing up playing Resident Evil, no one really knew what it was. Like, it was a bit. So when we launched Biohazard Declassified and it picked up steam and whatnot, it's I think people just like that the safe space community of talking with like-minded fans. So this is why this has piqued everybody's interest, is they're seeing it and it almost like unlocks that part of their brain where they're like, oh, I remember playing Resident Evil 1 and 2 for the first time back in like the late 90s, early 2000s.
What's the right way to put it? They're not the best control games, but once you get used to the tank controls there, you just get used to it. You know which way's forward, you know where you're going. But I can understand why some people prefer the later games.
Yeah, absolutely.
Especially if they started with the later games, I can get how it can be harder to go back. But it's just, for me, you know, growing up, my dad, he had a roommate that lived in the part of the house above him. And they asked me if I wanted to come upstairs one time and see their PlayStation. I think I was 9. And I didn't even know what it was. I had no idea what a PlayStation was, but they were playing the first Resident Evil game. And from the very first time I saw it, I was absolutely obsessed. I begged my mother at the time, you know, I want to sell my Sega. I want to sell my Super Nintendo. I want to get PlayStation. I need to get this game. And it's been a huge part of my life ever since. And God, the fact that I'm able to do this and people have good reception of it is just, it's, I can't say enough about it.
Yeah, it's where we all need to be in a way. Like it's perfect. So going back to Revisited, I'd note at the end of this fantastic video that you've got a demo coming soon-ish.
Yes. So the reason that the ish is there is because Revisited isn't the only thing I work on. Now, you know, Andrew handles the art department. You know, he handles all the quality, and for the most part, I handle the coding. You know, aside from when Rez is around for 3 days at a time every 4 months. So, you know, I handle a lot of the coding, and we do have a to-do list. I have a to-do list of things to finish before the demo, but I also work on other mods. You know, I work on mods with Aiden, you know, Survivor, Redux. I also help out a lot of people with their mods within the community. I run the wiki. Colin Ryan is actually in the chat here. Me, him, Andrew, and Aiden are working on another project that we'll talk about another time. And so it's really there's a lot to do. You know, I like making tools for the community, especially if there's somebody that is having a hard time doing something. I say, well, I know how to do this. how can I get you from point A to point B the fastest? What can I do to teach you this? And it's what I try and do with every new person that comes in the community if they're having a struggle. And so it's always trying to balance that time. I also have a 40-hour-a-week job, a wife, kids, etc. So balance is a huge part of my life, but I try and dedicate at least a couple hours a day to revisit it specifically. If I had to take an educated guess, I would say internal testing on the finished demo would begin probably in about a month and a half from now. And as long as internal testing goes well, you guys can expect a demo shortly after that. The only thing that may not make it into the demo would be like, yeah, I see Colin's reply there. The only thing that may not make it into the demo may be some of the music or audio, but that is something I'm still working on as well. And there's other tricky ways to get that in if needed.
Unfortunately, I'm not much of a scripter, so I can't really help there. And if I did, I'd probably just end up butchering everything and putting the project way behind, just introducing more parts.
So we're gonna have a demo. Where are we at now? So we're at mid-Jan. So what, sort of mid-March maybe?
That's the goal. Yeah, that's the goal. The demo is going to be, it's between 24 and 26 rooms. I got to get a couple more in and do a final count, but it will primarily be that Parasite Eve 2 area itself for the Arclay Mountains. We do have, my last count, I think we have like 5 puzzles in that area, so it'll take a little while, especially on your first run through, to fully understand everything that's going on. And the demo will ultimately end with you entering the mansion, kind of like how the original Resident Evil 1 demo ended with the snake at the end. But I'm not going to give away what we'll have the demo end with anyway.
Of course. And then in terms of delivering the main product, you say it was going to be in multiple parts. Yes.
So because of the scale of the project, we have literally the entire mansion from Resident Evil 1. The guardhouse and the courtyard are all complete and working within the game. It's really just adding our scripting to it, adding our enemies, etc. So you take into account that we have the Parasite Eve 2 areas, which in and of itself is as big as the courtyard and guardhouse. But we have the entire mansion, courtyard, guardhouse, plus the Resident Evil 1 remake areas, a few of our own areas, and a couple of areas from other games as well that haven't been shown yet. There was no way to fit everything and still feel comfortable saying, okay, we can still get this onto PS1 on one disc. And so instead we said, well, we'll take part 1, which is, the Arclay Mountains, mansion, etc. We'll make that its own thing. And then part 2 comes after that by about 2 or 3 months. And it's the same type of thing right before Resident Evil 2 and 3 take place. And it works in a similar way. We're still working out all the details on that, although most of the rooms for that are already set up as well.
So you had all the rooms stacked on top of each other, and I think the PlayStation would cry.
Yeah, exactly. And that was a big part of it, because we were literally maxing out the cameras on every single room, to the point where I was more worried about the space on the PS1 disc itself, because I'm like, I have 120 of these files and they're each going to be about 1 megabyte each, whereas they used to be about half of that. So I think it was a good decision in the end, just because it allows us to not have to constrain ourselves so much when working on part 1 and say, well, we don't want to go too far with this because we still need space for part 2. And by putting it into 2 discs, which is kind of how the game already works anyway, it just fit too well not to do.
And just going back to the demo release here, is that mid-March, that's just can be for the PC release, or is that
both?
So PC and PSX.
Hopefully.
Man, that's so ambitious.
Hopefully.
I can't believe I can't believe we're at a time
before, but sorry.
Well, no, I was just going to say, I can't believe we're at a time where this is even being considered. I remember it was just, I know Biohazard Espana's always done PSX related mods, and Aiden, we used to go back and forth all the time about, why don't you do it? And I think he's starting to see the light. I just think it's crazy that we're at a point where we can now consider releasing it on the hardware that we all probably enjoyed Resident Evil on.
And that's it's a big part of it for me. If I can sit down and play this on an actual PlayStation on a CRT, then I've achieved my dream.
It was always
Well,
mainly PCs being built because it was so much easier to swap files out, because the PSX, when you change the disk, it just breaks all the file entries, and I believe there's now tools to help sort that out. So there's probably more mods coming to the PlayStation now.
And that was a big part of it. Back in the day, West 67 had created rebuilders for Resident Evil 1, 2, and 3 for specific versions of them. But they have to be run through a virtual machine on Windows XP generally. When I very first started here, a buddy of mine from the Fallout community, which I mod for as well, he helped me create a rebuilder that will run on Windows 10. It's actually Excel and Python based, but you don't need Excel to run it. It makes the process of rebuilding your image much, much easier. And so it's a lot easier for people to create mods for PlayStation now as well.
Oh no, it sounds like you've made such huge progress in that. And again, so what is the process of? I know it's on PC. It's as simple as launching an executable. What would be the process if I wanted to get this functioning on a PlayStation 1, for example?
So most of the files are 1.1, are the important ones. The room files themselves, the RDTs that contain the actual room data, collisions, camera views, things like that. Aside from the sounds located within those, they're all 1.1 from the PC to the PS1 version of the game. So most of it can just be literally copy pasted over. Where we have some more issues, like I mentioned masking earlier, which is the layers where it looks like your character is behind something. That took a lot more work. Luckily, as I mentioned, Water Fuel just kind of showed up to our Discord a couple weeks ago and started looking into this. He made a small program to be able to inject these new mask files into the BSS files that the game uses to store backgrounds and masks. And so I created a front end for it, and I said, "Hey, Aiden, can you test this?" You know, I did a couple rooms for Survivor, or I did the first room for Survivor Redux with the masks that I made, sent it to him, and he sent it to me like, "Oh, we're good, boys." So yesterday I finished up a rebuild or a program to run as a front end for that. I translated it into English, Spanish, and German, so that as many people as possible can take advantage of that.
Oh, that's brilliant. So you've also got kind of you've localized your own game.
Yeah.
Jesus, is there anything this game doesn't do? Can I get this game to clean my car? Is that possible?
Unfortunately,
If you could find a way to code that, yeah. I mean, the thing that video games at their very core are just code. I mean, that's really all it is, and it's really about how can I relate to that code. You know, how can I get that game to understand what I'm telling it to do, and then do that.
I'm finding some way to finesse it to do something else as well.
Well, this is. Oh, go on.
At the end of the day, a lot of coding is yes no. So it's a case of finding how to get what you want into a yes no way of thinking.
This has always interested me about, especially not so much mods, like modders, you know, throwing 10 Mr. X's at you, making it super hard. But for the guys like you, Aiden, Res Evil, why are you trying so hard to fit a triangle into a circle hole? And by that analogy, I mean using classic Resident Evil 2 or Resident Evil 2 source next, when you could just pick up a book on Unity or Unreal Engine and just make a game out of that. Why are you guys so persistent in using a 24-year-old game? Please tell me.
A couple reasons. I didn't play the game originally in Unity. I played it on the PlayStation. That's where my heart within Resident Evil lies, is with the PS1, and a little bit with the PS2 when it comes to Code Veronica. But really, I want to be able to play it on the PlayStation 1. I want to be able to play it on the PC, and I want. Unity's great. The problem is, and I don't want to throw anybody under the bus. So I'm trying to think about the best way to say this. It's hard for me when I see a game that says PS1 demake, and it's not. It's not something that could feasibly even run on a PlayStation 1. It's a Unity program. that somebody wrote PS1 demake on, and it's not. And in that, I like the challenge. I modded Bethesda 4 or Fallout 4 for quite a while on the Bethesda website, but PlayStation 4 could not use any external assets. So people kept saying, well, you can't do this, you can't do this, you can't do this. And every single one of my mods there does something that they say you can't do without external assets at a literal fraction of the size of the mod on your hardware. Challenges like that, just when you break through something like that, there's so much more, I don't want to say dopamine, but there's a lot more reward feeling when you say, well, I took something that they made this long ago, and then I added something that they didn't know how to add back then.
And for me, it's the case of, if I was to make my own game, I'd use Unity, because then obviously you can do whatever you want with it. But it's just the feel. With the classic Resident Evils, you've got the limits of the file types and the graphics, so you have to work within that. Whereas if you use Unity, you can go, well, I'll just use a slightly larger texture, and then you end up snowballing away. And you want it to be a PlayStation 1 like game, but you're not using the native resolutions or textures. There's a lot of demakes I've seen which use quite large textures for the rooms and quite large textures for the characters. And you can't have both, because in the original Resident Evil, the only reason why all the models and characters have quite detailed textures for the time is because most of the rooms were pre-rendered backgrounds. Whereas if you made every room 3D, you've got to put a texture on each of the objects, and that reduces the texture size that the whole entire game could have. So you end up with this weird thing where it's like you are trying to be a demake, but you're not quite hitting it. You're probably more hitting a Dreamcast level demake rather than PlayStation.
And on top of that, what we can also take away is a lot of assets that, and I'm probably using the term assets wrong, but a lot of the things that we associate with Resident Evil, like the walking animations, just how assets behave inside, like how enemies behave, how players behave, they're kind of already made. So if we wanted to adapt that for Unity, we would have to build that. And of the stuff that I've seen, people when they've built Unity-esque Resident Evil clones, it ends up looking quite janky, actually.
Yes, that's one of the reasons why I haven't done it, because I know I couldn't remake those animations. I wouldn't want to just steal them from the game.
Right. And that's part of the problem as well, because it's never going to feel like that 1-1 experience of playing it on the original PlayStation. It's never going to, whether the walking feels a little more spongy or a little bit harder, or whether the sound is different. There's always going to be something that's a little bit different. And instead, we already have a tried and true engine that works, that people enjoy. And for me, it's easier to pick up and just inject things into that, change up how the code works, change up the enemies, and change up the story, than it is to do all that, but also build an entirely new engine on top of it for the game to run in.
I just remember trying to play Sonic games back in the early noughts, and people were trying to emulate how Sonic worked, but obviously it didn't feel right.
Right.
Well, I suppose it's like driving a car, BMWs drive a certain way, Mercedes drive a certain way. They can't necessarily be replicated, no matter how good, how hard you try. I think that's a fair statement. And again, I'll take your point about kind of the dopamine release, where you're almost it's the thrill of the chase almost. Do you feel like when you get to the end though, you're going to be like, but I suppose in a way you could just work on something else. Do you feel like when you get to the end, you're going to be like, oh man, like, have we done everything we needed to do?
There's always more mods. The great thing about Resident Evil 2 and its scripting system, while it is complicated, really the limits of it are based on your own creativity. Just like you saw Aiden do the other day with the character swapping, which was fantastic. It's something I thought about before, and now we can take that and we can perfect it and we can make it work, exactly as it should. it's why I love the Resident Evil 2 engine so much. There's so much you can do with it that there's really, there's an end, but is there? I mean, is there really an end? Because for me, it'll be great to play the mod, but my enjoyment from it is going to come from seeing other people create it. And it's okay. Well, what else can I create that people are going to like?
I have several ideas for mods. It's just a case of I need to learn the scripting and then make the backgrounds have a completely unique experience. Don't use any assets that have been seen before.
Definitely.
That takes time and practice.
Well, I think that was one of the aims for Dark Biohazard back in the day, was to almost there's no original assets from Resident
Right.
Evil. It's his complete own game.
It was going to be, unfortunately, that's
So you guys have had a lot of experience kind of pushing towards this revisited. What have you guys worked on before that some of the people listening and watching will be familiar with? We start with Andrew. What's some high profile mods that you've worked on previously?
I helped Aidan with his Hunter mod when I restarted working on mods back in 2020. But to be honest, I haven't done that many mods. It's most of my time has been making assets or trying to learn how Resident Evil worked up until about 2013, 2014, when I went away from the community for a bit. The only other mod that I've actually released was way back in 2002, 2003, a really bad one called Requiem of Spies. And that was just using all the knowledge that I had at the time. And after that, it was a case of, let's try and learn more. Let's try and learn more. And I got stuck in a loop where I was just trying to learn. And it got to a point where I think it was like 2010. We still didn't know how to make new backgrounds. I mean, change the graphics because they were encrypted. And someone came along and went, hey, here's a tool to do it. And that's kind of when you got like Team 96 and Distant Memory starting up. So I really wish I could have done more, but I just got stuck in a loop where I was just trying to learn everything.
Yeah, and that's dangerous because we've all got different skills. I'm not a coder. I'm not a modder. I'm not anything like that. But what we are good at is marketing. Marketing mods. We're good at marketing different. We all have different skills in our life, and it's taking them skills from each person to make that kind of real collaborative effort.
Exactly, getting a team together that you can rely on. It's like, I know I can leave Elric to do the scripting, and he works the magic. So therefore, I can just work on doing the new textures, so I can spend an evening making a new texture for a character and not have to worry about what else I need to do.
Great. And yourself, Elric?
Oh God. So if you want to get a time machine, we can go back to the 90s when I started making mods for Duke Nukem. Resident Evil was one of the first mods that I made for Duke Nukem. But the thing about 3.5-inch floppy disks and Windows 95, they don't last. So I don't have much of that data anymore. But after that, I moved over to StarCraft modding for a while. I made a lot of Zergling Blood type maps, hero maps, things like that. My brother and I then moved over to working on Warcraft 3 for a while. We were making campaigns there. Same type of issue with floppy disks, lost most of our data, unfortunately. But really, it was all about learning. With Duke 3D, I learned a lot of C coding because that's what their conf files were based in back then. So I learned how to, in trying to make a Resident Evil mod, I was like, let's say we got to hit spacebar to actually pick up an item, which isn't normally a thing in those type of games. And so a lot of rewriting. I wouldn't say the engine because of the way that it's all set up. It's really all just their own specific files. I guess you'd call it more like LUA files these days. And I actually had a chance to talk to Ken Silverman, who's kind of my hero because he built that engine back in the day. And his response was kind of a quote from Duke Nukem. He's like, well, I guess I saved your world, and that's better than being a inspiration for birth control. And I was like, wow, I don't know if I should take that harshly or not, but I appreciate it. But after that, really, the main game that I mod is Final Fantasy Tactics. I've been modding that for about 11 years. I have a mod called Journey of the Five. that takes and it takes Ramza from the original Final Fantasy Tactics. It also takes Dante from Devil May Cry, Link from Legend of Zelda, Cloud from Final Fantasy VII, and Snake from Metal Gear Solid. And it kind of throws them all into one story, but in a lore-friendly way, as weird as that sounds, within the universe of the game. And large, ambitious projects have always been something I've done. If you've played Fallout 4 on PC or PS4, you've probably used some of my mods. If you used mods, I think last I checked, Scrap That Settlement had like 2.5 million downloads, so it's a pretty popular one. But really, I would say the most thing that people would know me from would be like the Final Fantasy stuff. But my passion's always been Resident Evil. I mean, I have more Resident Evil tattoos than any other kind of tattoos I have on me, and it's, as I mentioned, the first time I saw that game, I was just, it's been my obsession ever since. And this is where I want to be. This is where I feel like all of what I've done up to this point has led up to this. And so what I want you guys to know me from is Revisited and Survivor Redux and these things. In addition to my Final Fantasy mods.
You're off to the best start. You're absolutely off to the best start. The trailer, which you can view on your personal channel, isn't it, Elric?
Yeah.
YouTube.com. Was it youtube.com/ is it 3 LRIC?
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah.
I'd have to, I think there was some kind of letter before it, maybe, but I can't remember what the actual YouTube address is.
That's cool.
We did have a second video, though, and I don't know that many people have seen that one that we put out, and that was based on, I did want to touch on that a little bit because I don't think people really understood what they were seeing as part of the issue.
We had it up quickly.
Yeah, and that was the poll video. And basically, we had a poll when we very first started, after we put out the trailer, and said, hey, what are your favorite BOWs within the Resident Evil franchise? And we gave a list of like Hunters and Ticks, Bandersnatch, and a few other ones. Now, anybody that knows what they're looking at here knows that Hunters were never in Resident Evil 2. So Andrew had to build this model from scratch and get it working within Resident Evil 2. And since he had already done the Ticks as well, we decided to include that. But not just that, at the end of this video, we also see a Crimson Head, which obviously was never in Resident Evil 2. And so we will have Crimson Head and Crimson Head mechanics within the mansion itself. I think that maybe when I made this video, I should have elaborated a little bit further because people were like, okay, well, those are Hunters in the mansion because that's a normal thing. But it's in the mansion within Resident Evil 2 and was definitely not just a copy-paste to get it in and working.
Oh no, I had to finesse the what you're actually looking at is lickers. I had to really hammer the licker to work like a hunter.
Yeah. Yep.
I'm just wondering how that's even possible. Like, because it's the only reason why I say this because it's so it. And Elric makes a great point that people just saw this and thought, "Oh, Hunters in Resident Evil 1." That's because you've modelled it and made it so accurate, like it's scary.
Yeah, basically what I did was I took the model from Resident Evil 1 to 2, reworked the licker so it kind of works like a hunter. It's still got some of the AI behavior of a licker, but it's also got the animations of a hunter. And I had to sit there and work out like which frames the licker would do its hit detection on, and try and match them up to the hunter's animations. And it's just getting the speeds as well because the hunter moves slightly faster than the licker does. It's just trying to get it all to work without the licker breaking. Because unfortunately at the moment we can't change the AI because it's somewhere in the executable, and unfortunately we don't have anyone that's found it yet.
Right.
Basically, it's smoke and mirrors, and it's just trying to, as I say, finesse it so it works. So you if you look at it hard enough, you can see that it's a licker, but on the surface, you don't notice it's a licker. Because to be fair, a lot of enemies behave very similar. They'll run straight at you and attack you.
And plus, they're blind by nature, aren't they? So they only detect you.
If you do stand still, the hunter will.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, that's going to be the only downfall. It'll be the same with the Hunters and the Crimson Heads, actually.
Yeah.
So how the Crimson Heads made?
Oh, to be honest, I've made a zombie Crimson Head texture, and pretty much whacked it onto the hunter, And I went, that actually looks like a Crimson Head. So I changed a few of the animations around so the attack animations look a little different. But because the Crimson Head is taller and longer, it looks different to the Hunter.
But hang on, how is that possible if the Hunter was never in Resident Evil 2?
Basically, I wrote a program to convert all the animations from Resident Evil 1 to Resident Evil 2, and then just sat there for ages with a hex editor, just making them all line up and to work. It sounds more complicated than it actually is, but to be honest, the data between Resident Evil 1 and Resident Evil 2 is very similar. If you know what you're looking at, it's quite easy to move it across. And the same with 3 back to 2, but there's a few areas there that are a bit of a problem. Because Resident Evil 1 and 2 is all models that objects will rotate around each other, so each object is its own thing. Resident Evil 3 uses meshes and mesh weighting, which Resident Evil 1 and 2 don't support. But at the base, all the animations are very similar.
He's done a fantastic job. He's actually converted a lot, like where you see the tick on the wall there in that scene that we just watched. He converted that, I believe, from Resident Evil 3. The reason that the cutscenes look so good in Revisited right now, like with Alice falling over the banister or the balcony and everything, is because Andrew was able to bring those animations over and give me access to them for the scenes I'm building.
Yeah, that was actually pretty wild seeing that in that was what, because I've seen a lot of Resident Evil mods and all cool custom backgrounds. Oh yeah, very impressive. And that's not me. That's not me mocking the project. But when I see that, I was like, whoa, this is actually going to be like next level.
That scene took a while. I'm not going to lie. That one was, I probably learned more while making that scene, just that 10 to 15 second scene there, than I learned in anything else I've done so far when it comes to actual scripting. To actually get her to, even right here when she's walking through and actually controlling their AI like this, is incredibly difficult to understand at first and really grasp. But here, and I can actually go into this scene a little bit. If you do encounter this scenario where, and again, this doesn't have to happen, but if it does, and she pushes you over the side, she is relocated to that lower area. So that's where she will be from that point on. Talking even about that, and going into randomization again, that's a big part of how this mod works. You can expect that because this is a smaller area, this is a hotel. We didn't want to overload it with zombies because of its size. So instead, what we've done is, let's say you haven't killed this enemy yet. This enemy's still alive, and now you're at this certain point in progression. Okay, well, now there's like a 50% chance that this enemy may enter this other room specifically while you're in there. And trying to make sure that we utilize as much as we can of what we have and use it to its fullest. But a lot of that came from how this scene was set up, because we have a masking layer here over the balcony so that Trent doesn't look like he's behind it right now. But then as soon as she goes to push him over the balcony with the animation that Andrew made, then the masking layer picks up and kind of masks Trent and Alice as they fall over the scene.
Let's apply a bit of science to this. I'll put it on 0.25. Let's there we go. Right, so just talk us through that again. You can
see he keeps walking backward a little bit more right here, but then as soon as he goes to fall over, you can see that his shadow disappears is when the masking actually kicks in. So then that allows it to look like he's actually falling over the balcony itself. I've probably done more masking than probably anybody else within the scene, just because I did the entire mansion by hand when I first came here. And so I have a pretty fair grasp on it, but it's an exact science, but it's not at the same time. Masking it's rough.
It is. You have to find your position within the room and then try and get the right level so you're either in front of it or behind it when you move in front or behind it.
Exactly, and that's the hard part about it, is setting your depth, because depth is what determines, okay, well, you're this far away from the camera, so right now you're in front of this mask, but if you're this far away from the camera, then you're behind this mask. So you have to set depth on every tiny little box of masking, and it does take a lot of time. But it really makes the product shine when you have the proper masking in there, which is why I was also happy to do it for Survivor Redux, because it really makes a mod come together.
This is what I found. This is what I found really interesting as well. Is that and it's something that I don't often see in a lot of mods which have custom backgrounds, and that's you've redone the door animations, and this one in particular looks ridiculously good.
Yeah, I was just there and I was like, well, we've got the room transitions, we need the doors. People skip over it, but it needs to be there. It's little things. It's like in the rooms as well. Not many people go around the room investigating all the objects and getting the text. It's why I've slipped in a few Easter eggs just to make those who do it have something to look for.
Definitely.
It's just the little polishers.
His doors are fantastic. If I recall correctly, that was actually maybe the first one he did. And the vacancy sign is actually there on the outside, but it changes on the inside. And the fact that he was even...
Of course it does.
That blew my mind. Because it's still just the one door, but the fact that he was able to pull that off was just like, all right, where are we going with this mod from that point on? That was like, okay, this is awesome.
The gas station door is a pain as well, because on one side you've got the opening times, on the other side it's just a standard door, and it's like, I could make it 2 different doors, but then you start using up all the doors. So I just had to find a crafty way of making the other side blank. The problem is you can't put too much into the doors because they're there for the memory load. I'm still a little worried about those doors when we hit the PlayStation, but we'll cross that when we get to it.
Yeah, again, that's something we've always got to consider is the limitations of the PlayStation and the other console platforms.
It's like my doors aren't any bigger than any of the vanilla doors in Resident Evil 2, so hopefully they will work fine. But there's some tricks I've used that the PlayStation might just go, yeah, no. At which point I have to
thank you.
doors and approach it from a different angle.
Really, all it is at that point is saying, okay, well, now we know why it breaks. Let's find out where and why, and then we can fix it. And that's why I'm always hesitant to give ETAs on things, because nearly every time I've given an ETA, something breaks. If I don't give an ETA, everything's generally works out all right. It may come out a week or before or after when I assume, but if I start giving ETAs, everything is going to break. And this is the door he's actually talking about right here.
Yeah, that's the door, because that side you've got the sale sign, the opening hours, but on the Parasite Eve backgrounds, the other side of the door is just blank. And obviously that takes up a lot of the texture space for those signs. So I basically found some areas I could reuse for the other side of the door and just remade the door in a mess. But you can see that the previous shot there, the door was just blank. It's like...
That's one thing that I haven't actually mentioned up until now, and that's you are implementing voice acting in the game, which is quite uncommon, to be honest.
Yes.
So is that something you want to keep in house, or is that something you would look to? Sub out to voice actors.
Unlike every other aspect of it, we have gotten a ton of people wanting to do voice acting, and so I can tell you right off the bat right now. In the demo alone, you're going to hear, obviously, me and Andrew. You hear both of us in the trailer. I'm voicing Trent. He's voicing Mickey. But in the intro, he has more voice, as well as Big Boss Incarnate. Res Evil Nemesis 30 has a voice in there. Rusty, one of the modelers from Team 96 way back in the day, he's got some voice in there, and a few other people. And I'm always happy to have anybody that wants to do voice work in there, as long as I can find a place to put it. The good thing about Revisited is, we're entering the mansion before Resident Evil 1. So not everybody's necessarily a zombie yet. Not everybody's necessarily changed just yet. You have people like the Keeper, the people from the Keeper's Diary. You have Scott. You have other people who, will appear or may appear as NPCs or have turned, zombies as you get there. And so we have a lot of room for voice acting. especially considering, what happens near the end of the mod and then the pickup of part 2, which I won't get too much into. But yeah, we will have plenty of space for voice acting. It was incredibly hard for me to do because I don't like hearing my voice back.
Yep.
Mostly when I'm testing, because once or twice, that's one thing, but you guys have to understand all these lines you've heard in the trailer. I've heard them 100,000 times at this point. And with the way that I have the scenes coded, there's no real good way for me to even skip those lines, because the scene, even if I'm running at 3 times speed, the scene will not progress until that audio is finished. So short of actually removing it for testing, which I don't really want to do, it's I have to hear it a ton. And so I know some people have brought up that I say manner instead of matter, which I should, and that will be fixed. But in general, all of these right now are placeholder dialogue that we can clean up in the future. Is just to actually write the scene and get the timing right. I need the dialogue and the timing for it to get that right, as well as the subtitles. But voice acting was something I really wanted to add because it was in the original game. And the original game had cheesy voice acting. And so that's kind of where we're at. We have, a lot of our music is more of like, the 80s synth type zombie music. And, you got the cheesy voice acting, and we're trying to keep it as true to the original as possible. And also giving ourselves an excuse for not being professional voice actors.
Yeah. I know a lot of people aren't happy that the quality of the voice acting is bad. It's like, well, it might be something we change. It might not be something we change. The problem is it's just a fun mod that we're making. So it's like, I'll just try and keep it fun and make it breezy, as they say.
Well,
Right,
yeah,
exactly.
it was, the original Biohazard, as I interpreted it, was, they always deliver. Everyone says, oh, yeah, it's got bad voice acting, but I almost feel like, and I've mentioned this before, that it's not necessarily bad. This, the original Resident Evil was marketed towards a Japanese audience. There wasn't English speaking, so it's almost like they're over pronouncing deliberately, in my opinion.
Yeah, exactly.
If anything, it's games design, and you could. At the end of the day, Resident Evil, old school Resident Evil dialogue was always hokey and B movie and everything like that. So
that's
where we're
why
at.
we have so many cameos with things like that. That's why you see a clip of Night of the Living Dead in the mod. That's why, these are kind of how Andrew and I bonded, was talking about this kind of stuff, and what we can add to add the flavor to the mod, and ourselves to it. And I like the campy movie style. I like, I grew up watching Evil Dead, Night of the Living Dead, Return of the Living Dead. I mean, these are the things that when I first saw Resident Evil, zombies were starting to become more mainstream, but it wasn't the mainstream, movie monster yet. And that didn't pick up until, closer to the, early to mid 2000s, and where it became oversaturated. But when I saw zombies in a game, having grown up watching, Night of the Living Dead with my dad, and that being like one of my most fond memories, and being able to see a game that created that, I was like, God, what, and then coming back to it this many years later, I'm like, we have to pay homage to these things, because this is why this mattered in the first place.
That's a fair point.
I always think if we go too professional with the voices, you get a bit of a dissonance between the old style game and high quality voice acting, and it won't kind of mesh, is what I'm worried about.
And I hate to not bring it down and kind of glass half empty vibe, but are you worried about this being taken down by Capcom?
No. So I've heard that a lot on a lot of different projects that I've worked on over the years. So I would be more worried about Squaresoft when it comes to the Parasite Eve 2 backgrounds, but even that, I'm not really worried. So there's a lot of scenarios in which people misunderstand how a cease and desist works. When a company actually sends a cease and desist, and I can tell you guys, a lot of the people that say they've gotten them just got tired of working on what they were working on and didn't want to continue. But when companies actually send a cease and desist, it's because of several reasons. Either you're making a large amount of money off of one of their IPs, and we don't take donations or anything like that. Or you're doing something that they themselves are interested in doing. And those are the two biggest reasons I've ever seen it happen. And even then, with the amount of mods that are out there, and even large mods, compared to the amount that have been taken down, I won't say that, maybe they don't care or maybe they don't, but at the end of the day, is it really worth their time to come after me, somebody that's not hurting their IP at all? I'm not taking any money from them. And all I'm doing is getting their fans to want more games like this. And so honestly, it's my concern over a C&D would be more something like if we were to use just, straight music from a completely different game. Like if we just straight up just took Parasite Eve music, did nothing with it and put it in the game without changing it at all. But even then, games like Mortal Night or Kendall's Cut, things like that have added music from other games, and they haven't gotten C&D either. So, I don't know where the big stigma with mods and C&Ds come from, but they're not nearly as common as people think they are. I've seen it, and I won't say that it's majority of the time, but I will say a lot of people that I've seen in the past in different communities say they got a C&D was just they got burnt out on the project. They didn't want to work on it anymore, and they didn't see a way out. It's unfortunate to see it happen that way. And then again, it's not to say that C&Ds don't happen. I know it happened with Crimson Echoes, I believe was the name for the Chrono Trigger mod years ago. But even that mod still came out. We still have it. So
it's like I've never received a C&D from Capcom ever. To be fair, I haven't done anything really major, but I've been around for 20 years. I've never hidden who I was. If Capcom really wanted to get in contact with me, they could just send me an email, say stop, and I would stop. But they never have. As I say, Square, that's a little bit more.
I think I've been modding Square games for the last decade, and the Final Fantasy Tactics community is very large, and we've never heard a peep from Square.
I think it's just down to if you're abusing their IP and you're making money, and obviously you're doing something horrid that tarnishes their name.
Exactly. If you're coming at them with a slap in the face and saying, well, we're doing this because you guys can't, or whatever, that's different. The worst thing that we have toward Capcom is seeing their logo get eaten by a zombie at the beginning of the game. Other than that, we love their lore and we want to expand on their lore. We don't want to dance.
I think now. I was going to say, I think now more than ever, it's just like there have been a few cease and desist. You bring up a great point. Sorry, Eric, you bring up a great point about they're either working on something or you're abusing it, and that's Daymare. Daymare was a perfect example of they was making a Resident Evil 2 remake because they were making a Resident Evil 2 remake and they didn't want you to kind of fuck with it.
I was going to mention
exactly.
And obviously Rockstar have been on a bit of a tangent recently, taking down mods, which I know not everyone's happy with. I think Capcom have always been a bit liberal with their licenses, to be honest.
The problem is they've always gotten their ideas from the mods. Like Rainbow Street Fighter and creating Street Fighter 2 Turbo and stuff like that.
Exactly.
Sorry, Andrew, what was you going to say before I interjected there?
Just going to mention Daymare and Resident Evil 2, and that's the only cease and desist that I know of off the top of my head that's Capcom's issued, and that was because they were working on Resident Evil 2, and the Unity, was it UDK Resident Evil 2 that they were building, looked really awesome. So obviously that was going to come whatever they put out.
And I'm sure didn't Capcom even go to the. This is what I mean. They're not out to as it appears currently. As of January 2022, whether that changes in the future, they even credited Invader Studios in Resident Evil 2 Remake. So they even kind of gave their little bit back, which they really didn't have to do.
They seem to be more friendly to fans than to a company like Nintendo, who just shuts down everything.
Yeah.
But Nintendo is quite protective of their IPs.
Even Squaresoft, the only time I've really seen them take any big action has been when it's Chrono Trigger related, really. And I don't know if that's because at some point they were, wanting to remake it themselves, but I know that there was like a 3D fan remake years ago that got taken down, supposedly. Then there was Crimson Echoes. But as far as ROM hacks go getting taken down, those are the main ones I've seen. And even, Nintendo... They will on occasion, yeah, but there's so many mods for older Nintendo games out there that they just haven't cared about at all. There's some kind of trigger that triggers it, and 9 times out of 10, it's money related.
Money related or Pokemon.
Yeah.
That's glorious. So, is there anything else you guys are working on in the background that you're happy to publicly share, aside from Revisited, as we kind of round the stream off?
I mean, I did recently have a room built for a new mod called Resident Evil Cubed. That will be inspired by the Cube movies, if you've ever seen those. Sort of an isolation type of thing, trying to get through different rooms, get through different traps. More of a standalone, not related to Resident Evil type of thing, just a fun little thing I wanted to do, mostly to test randomization. And it was so that's what I've used it for thus far. As I mentioned earlier, me, Andrew, Aiden, and another person that was in the chat here, we are working on another project. It's something that we hinted at briefly before, and Aiden kind of hinted at in his, but we're not ready to release anything about that yet.
Too early.
I mean, other than that, everybody here knows, as I mentioned, I do work on Survivor Redux with Aiden, as well as Andrew does as well. Really, if there's somebody in the community that wants help and they have a cool idea, I'm going to do what I can to help them out. So I don't expect to be credited on everything I do, but there's a lot of Resident Evil mods that are out right now I had some kind of part in. Even like the Ghost Survivors mod that Biohazard Hispana made last year. I did the gas station portion of that for him. I reversed the one that we have from Revisited. I literally flipped it around to look more like the gas station from the Ghost Survivors and Resident Evil 2 remake. Really, those are the main things. I have a couple more tools in the works right now. Aiden, like I said, we talk every day about, hey, what can we do to make this better? He just gave me some feedback on the tool I made yesterday, so I'm going to do a couple updates to that, hopefully tonight. But really, the main project is the community itself. I feel like, I opened up the Discord. We got classicresidentevilmodding.com. I opened up the wiki so that we can get this community growing again and really, get it out there. And, so now we have this, and we also have Resident Evil modification between the two. If anybody ever needs help with anything, there's always somebody available now.
Let's provide help where is possible. Sometimes it's hard to explain what you need to do.
Definitely.
And yourself, Andrew, what are you working on aside from the projects that Elric has mentioned? Because you're all in the same circles, really. So
Pretty much. Usually, if Aiden needs something, he pops and asks me, and I'll see if I can do something for him. But at the moment, it's mainly in the future. I hope to do more mods and some completely unique ones. But at the moment, it's Revisited. I've done a couple of things for Survivor Redux and the other project that shall not be named.
well, I'm sure we'll hear about it in due course.
I mean, I do want to, because we did mention that, we are the devs of Resident Evil Revisited, but we are not the only people on the team. I just want to make that clear to everybody that does see this, because we do have a lot of help from a lot of people. Aiden may not be on the team, although he will be once we start more on the mansion, because obviously who's better with Resident Evil 1 than Aiden? But we also have, as I mentioned, Rusty, El Rincon del Lobenzo, Hunter Beta 2, Joshua Kane, Juvenile De Corte, the Mito-san, as well as Megan Grass. And Megan Grass is a big one because she left the scene for a long time, but she made a lot of the original tools used to dissect and edit the games. And she came back. Well, I won't say she came back. She's part of the Revisited team, but she's not really in any other part of the scene, but she has started making tools again. A few more of those are going to be released soon. Aiden and I have been testing one of them for a while. If you've seen Aiden's streams on YouTube, you've probably seen them. So those will be coming out alongside a tutorial soon. But it's really, the community has made this so much better than what it was going to be when it was just me. And I really can't thank them enough. The teamwork here has been fantastic.
Yeah, Megan's one of those that's just awesome. I've known, been in contact with her for like years. I found some information. I passed it over. Then she came out with a tool and went, "Here's a bunch of bits that you missed, but this tool now does it." Excellent.
No, that's glorious. Where can we find updates on Revisited specifically?
So the main thing is going to be the revisited Twitter, which is twitter.com, and then I believe RE_revisited. Most of our updates are going to be on there, but you can also check out classicremodding.com. We do have a lot of information there, as well as a wiki with a lot of information on modding the game, which we're constantly updating. The most direct way, though, if you want to get updates, is to join the Classic Resident Evil Modding Discord. Myself and Aiden are both admins there. And we have everybody who's talented within the community, for the most part, is either between there or Resident Evil Modification. Both of them are open Discords, and both of them you can find links for in pretty much any of my videos, especially the trailer for Revisited.
No, brilliant. Thank you for that. And I would like to, on the aside, when the demo does come out, I did the same with Aiden with Resident Evil Survivor. If the times work for you too, I'd love to have you both on, and then we do kind of a live stream of the entire demo, and then you guys can kind of have a developer commentary over the top if that'd be of interest to yourselves.
That would be fantastic.
Point out all the flaws that we see all the time when we play it.
That's the hardest part about modding is we see the things a million times, and we're going to see a million flaws that you guys will never even notice.
I do something, I see all the flaws, I pass it over. Everyone's like, "Oh, that looks fine." It's like, but I see all the flaws. It's like, I know.
I mean, it happened with me just yesterday. So.
Yeah.
No, that's glorious. Well, thank you, gentlemen. It's really, really appreciated you jumping on today. Again, make sure you check out updates at twitter.com/re_revisited. And I cannot wait for this to be released. This is, again, another fantastic modification from, I actually think it's insulting calling them modifications. Whenever I speak to Aiden, they're total conversions. That's what they are. They're total conversions of Resident Evil. So let's call them what they are.
I really thank you for having us. Like I said, I've been modding for a long time. I've never done anything like this before, though. So this is definitely a first for me. So I really appreciate you reaching us out, wanting to have us on here. It really means a lot. It's like I said, this project has blown up way more than we expected. So it's awesome to see it's been so well received and people are excited for it.
Yeah, listen, you guys have got a story. You've got a modification. This story needs to be told. It's of interest to everybody in the Resident Evil kind of circle. So yeah, it's my job to kind of bring cool guests like yourselves, like Aiden. Like some of the other fantastic guests I've had on to, tell your story.
Oh, thank you for your time.
Yeah, indeed. No, thank you. Thank you very much. Well, this has been the Biohazard Declassified podcast. Thank you all for tuning in, and hopefully we'll see you all in the next one.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you very much.